Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Selma Morningstar and I have Selima here with me. Thank you so much for joining us, Selima. I was really inspired by your post in the Womb-Centered Healing Temple Facebook group about herbs. You made a post of 11 uses for herbs, sacred uses, ceremonial uses, healing uses, that just really felt quite comprehensive and concise. And I was like, ooh. And I was curious if you had come up with that nice graphic. I think you did, right?
Yes, I did.
And I was like, wow, what a great way to introduce people to herbs. And so I wanted to, get to know you better and get to know your work and see what other beautiful gems of wisdom you had to share with us in a podcast interview. So thank you for joining us. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself a little more, sharing about your journey with womb-centered healing and herbalism and all of those wonderful things. So please do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Selma. Thank you for having me. I'm really glad that you were inspired by that post. And I'm really glad I posted it. It was an idea that just came into my head and I got on the computer and just fired away. And it was really well received by a lot of people. So I appreciate you reaching out. I'm Selima Harleston Lust. I'm an herbalist, spiritual teacher, astrologer. And I really, facilitate healing with plants. My whole, intention or purpose in the work that I do is helping people travel the shortest distance from pain to healed, ill to well, and broken to whole. Mm-hmm. And how I came into this work, which really relates to my womb-centered healing journey too, is that I was, pursuing all of the career moves that you dream and envision for yourself when you're a teenager and in your early adulthood, and all of the doors that I thought were my doors were closing in my face. And I realized that the doors that were opening were the invitations to my own healing. And that was healing from a traumatic childhood. All sorts of abuse went on in my own home. And it's not that, I wasn't aware of how my environment was and how it was traumatic. It was just, I didn't know what to do about it. And so there was like these parallel process of the career's not working out the way I think it's supposed to. And here's so many opportunities for me to address the physical pain that was going on in my body and just traveling around to all different places in my body, and just so many messages coming from spirit that, Selima, you need to work on your childhood, and you need to work on healing from sexual trauma, and you need to work on healing from, just the lineage of abuses and generational, that's what I like to think of as like generational curses and traumas. It's those emotional wounds that we pass down from person to person to person. And I was the person that's in line to say no more and to stop. And so that's how I do plants. I started, changing diet, starting a new exercise regimen, and then started working with natural remedies and herbs, and it just never ended. My curiosity never ended. My work in the work never ended. And we launched a business. I teach, do consultations, do readings, have a mentorship program. And it's really the plants that helped me to open up to what I was resistant to and to face those early wounds, and gave me the courage, like helped me find my inner courage to work on it. So I credit plants for saving my life.
Wow, that's such a testimony. I've talked with a lot of people about early childhood trauma healing. It's a big topic in the Womb-Centered Healing Temple. I talk about it all the time. Often that trauma starts when we're conceived, and that's part of the work that I do in my apprenticeship program, is we go all the way back to actually preconception, when our ancestors are gathering and and the energies for our incarnation are gathering. And so then right. And I really feel this supportive energy from the plant realms in those journeys of looking back and seeing, okay, what are the gifts and what are the challenges, what are the traumas what are the, missing pieces? Where did things get shattered?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we piece those things back together? I feel the plants really offering a supportive field of reweaving for us in these areas where we're working with, it's because it's pre-memory oftentimes. The earliest, most profound traumas are from, we don't even have conscious memory of. And it's in our cells, it's in our tissues, it's in how our DNA creates new cells. Our DNA has been deactivated. Certain capacities in our DNA has been deactivated, and other capacities to cope with stress and constant trauma. That's what's activated. And it feels like the plants, with their little tiny phytochemicals and their energetic beingness, have a certain medicine for that, for us. And it, learning about, because a lot of people come to plants looking at it as somewhat more of a physiological medicine, and that there's somehow a separation between the physiology and the emotional and trauma healing. Whereas I feel like when you look at the emotional and trauma healing and how that affects your DNA as a developing fetus, it is one and the same. Mm-hmm. And that when you look at it, that womb-centered healing, it brings all of that together. So the ancestral healing is a genetic, physiological transmission. It's not just this spiritual thing disconnected from the physiology. It's completely woven into it. And I'm just saying this out loud to give people maybe to weave the information together, because it really does go hand in hand. And so when you're talking about emotional and trauma healing from early childhood with plants, it makes complete sense to me. And I can't wait to hear what you're going to share about it. But I just wanted to clarify for listeners that yes, emotional and trauma healing from early childhood is a physiological thing as well as an energetic thing. And the plants have a huge wisdom and huge support for that. So I would love to hear how you began to discover that and work with the plants in that process for you, Selima.
Yeah, perfect. You said so much that I 100% agree with. Like, we're whole beings. And I think that so much of it is the way that people approach plants, like you said, from this physiological standpoint. I think we get that from the medical model, that our modern medical model, where it's like, okay, take drugs for symptoms. Well, I want to be holistic, so let me just take plants for symptoms. And it's like, it's not like that. It's not like that at all. You're really, that path to wholeness is like, yes, use the entire medicine, connect with the medicine, connect with the plants. There's this whole being that is so divine, that has so much intelligence, that comes directly from source, that hasn't been traumatized, and can help facilitate your process for restoring your wholeness, reclaiming your power. How I got into it, again, it really started on the outside in, and working on the body, being like, well, what most people believe, right, is, well, if I eat right and I exercise, then I'll be healthy. And I quickly realized, well, that's not entirely true. And so the diet and the exercise, that made an impact for sure. And I was feeling better in my physical body with all of the just different chronic pains that were going on. But I plateaued, and I was like, well, what else is going on? And at the same time, I was working with plant medicine, but not that deeply. And so I was like, well, maybe like this is the path. I'm really interested in this. So I studied with a mentor, Karen Rose, out of Brooklyn. And it was through that process of really diving into plants and diving into my own spiritual awakening journey, whatever you want to call it, that I realized it was the emotional piece in myself that I really wasn't connecting with. I'm connecting with my physical body, but I'm not connecting with my feelings. And the plants help to facilitate that process. And then it was just, when you're doing a connect the dot graphic, and it doesn't make sense at first, but the picture, comes to be, that's really how it was. Like, in the moment of it, it was just this strong desire to heal, to feel better in all ways. And the more I asked myself of that, the more I just kept returning plant medicine and working with them, meditating with them, just doing more than just ingesting.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I was going to ask you, can you give a specific story perhaps about a particular plant that you started to connect with at a certain point on a more holistic level? What was the first plant that you actually started to meditate with and really experience this, all of the energetic support and wholeness that the plant had to offer you and how the plant could guide you?
Yeah, that plant would be burdock. That
Burdock.
was the first plant, burdock root, that I did a 3-month plant communion with and worked with it every day. And still, but like that was the very first plant that I spent a lot of quality time with. And burdock, physiologically, it works on the liver. It's very supportive to the liver, but the liver is also the seat of our anger. And so during that process, where you're just accepting that you're called to this plant, but you're not fully aware of what the journey is going to be. I wasn't connected with my own anger that was inside of me as a result of my childhood. And that was the plant that helped really to help me express it and help me acknowledge it.
This is perfect. One of my apprentices just this week said, Selma, what do we do about anger? So, okay, we're gonna have a call about that. So we got a call in the apprenticeship about anger that's coming up just on Monday. So I would love to hear you share more about how you started to realize what you started this 3-month journey with burdock. You probably weren't aware at the beginning that burdock root was going to get you in touch with your anger. I'm really curious about the specific things that happened for you as you were working with burdock, how you were working with burdock, and when you started to become aware that burdock was getting you in touch with your anger, and how burdock guided you to work with your anger.
Yeah, so big question with burdock, and I have to go back in time because this is around 2011, 2012, and so let me pull from my memory bank. I know that in terms of working with the plant, I worked with the plant every single day. I dreamt with it. I had it under my pillow. I had tinctures of it. I would make medicine of it. I lived in Brooklyn at the time, and my access to the fresh plant was in Prospect Park. You can't harvest in Prospect Park, but I would go on plant walks, and we would, go to the plant, go to the supermarket and find the fresh gobo root if we could find it, cook with it as well. So lots of tangible ways of working with the medicine, and allowing, that was also when I was pretty much beginning my meditation practice, and I wasn't certain that it was working. So I do remember from journal entries that I saw a lot of colors. It's almost like the beginning of the movies that you see where things are coming into focus. And so at that time, it was really working on me learning to see, me learning to see beyond the physical, but to see into just the other realms, for lack of a better word. I journaled every day during that process, and that was really when, I'm trying to think if that was the same time. I don't think that was the same time that the repressed memories started resurfacing, but I think that is the time when I was recognizing that this is the issue that I need to work on, and accepting that and acknowledging that and not brushing it off. I think that because anger and rage was so explosive and expressive in the household that I grew up in, that I'm cool, I'm cool, I'm calm, I'm collected, I'm cold. I was a person who didn't seem affected by the other things that different days. No, I'm always cool. And my anger's never, even to this day, it's never that eruptive, certainly not violent, but I think that it helped me realize maybe the value of just acknowledging being angry. That it's no, what I experienced was not I mean, now there's a greater understanding of it, but it was not okay. It was completely unfair. This was not a safe environment. Like just being able to put words, I think at that same time as well, I was really putting words to emotions. I remember literally looking up the definitions of emotions because I was so detached from them and I was so like, yeah, just cut off from that side of myself because that's the place where the wounds had happened. You know what I mean? So I remember looking up compassion in the dictionary. I remember like looking up and like writing down what are the different feelings that people feel, because I feel very robotic. And I think burdock really helped to, like I have a visual in my mind, but of just that like tunnel digging, just digging and like turning and getting to like, it's a taproot. So it goes deep. It goes deep. Yeah, that's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I love the association with this emotional development, you know, that when we're having unsafe emotional childhood experiences, that disrupts our natural emotional development in myriad ways, right? You know, oftentimes we're being raised by people who never developed their emotional wisdom, our whole society is completely disrupted in its emotional development because of the whole patriarchal thing that emotions are equal to weakness, are to be suppressed, swept under the rug, ignored, that they're a hindrance to healthy functioning in life. I mean, it's like, well, no. and yet we all have that intrinsic entrainment, you know. I mean, we're discouraged from ever showing emotion in school, right? If you cry in school, you're removed from the classroom, you're told to stop crying. If you get angry in school, you're certainly removed and told to stop being angry, you know. And then of course in our homes, if our parents are having unhealthy emotional communication patterns with each other, we either emulate them and do that ourselves, or we say, I'm never doing that. I'm going to shut myself off. And that's what I did. Sounds like that's what you did.
That's what I did. Yeah.
Myself off from any emotions that were big and scary and dangerous, right? Especially anger. And so we get, like you said, completely disconnected from our emotional wisdom, and that burdock, that root that's like, digging down into the dirt, right? Into the shadow areas, and it's persistent. I grow burdock in the garden, and I just harvested burdock after growing it from seed for a couple of years. And I know from harvesting it elsewhere where it's this big mature plant that you're not going to get to the very tip of that taproot.
Right.
You're not going to get every inch of that taproot unless, I mean, there's ways that you can grow burdock and trick it. And like, I heard of somebody trying to figure out how to grow burdock and be able to harvest the entire taproot. What you do is you plant it in a bale of hay, and you put a PVC pipe, a half of a cut in half PVC pipe down through the length of the bale of hay, and plant the burdock at the top of that so it grows its root along the length of the PVC pipe. Then you can dig through the hay and root out. I'm like, I've never been that elaborate with my gardening. No. It's like, no, we'll grow and we get this much of the burdock. Yeah. And then guess what? That root from down below, it comes back up, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And isn't that wisdom too of like when we are looking at the layers of the wounding, if we just look at the surface, it just keeps sprouting right back up, just like burdock, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So powerful. So this was, the burdock was your first, it sounds like it was making you aware of what the issues were. It was helping you to see them clearly. It was giving you the wisdom and the stamina, probably, and the groundedness to really follow those root tunnels, right? Through your past, through your inner realms, through your finding the places where maybe you had stored unfelt and unresolved traumas and emotions in your body.
Yep.
Right? Like your body being the soil and your consciousness being like that burdock root searching through. And so I'm curious then, so you said in the middle of what you shared that the burdock it wasn't during the burdock period of 3 months where you became aware of repressed memories. Was there another plant that then supported you after you had your completion with burdock, or to find your memories?
Yeah, from there, I think that was, I just continued with the work. And so I would say, when did, like, the repressed memory of me being raped around 4 or 5 years old, that resurfaced when maybe 2 years later. And there wasn't a specific plant at the time, but I had continued in the work with the plant. So by this time that was 2014. I had completed, I think, my herbal apprenticeship program, and I'd done a bunch of other things as well that helped with the process. We had our business. I mean, I think the plants were, at that point, they were just a part of my life. And now the meditation, like everything that happened during that period, was just a part of my life now. It was a part of my spiritual practice. And I also knew I was so much more connected with my body, that I understood the physical triggers that were happening, and making the connections. That's like, oh, I'm thinking about trauma. I'm thinking about my childhood. My body feels like it's going to completely empty out. And so that awareness of what was happening in the body and that mind-body connection grew and developed. And it was still just this strong desire. It's like, no, I want to feel whole and solid inside of myself. And I just continued to hold that intention for myself. And I knew there was at one point, I do believe that burdock and hawthorn a little bit, well, both, helped me to release so much of what I was holding from my childhood that it created the space for me to desire more love. And for the first time during this process, now this is like a 2-year process, that's when I was like, oh, I want a child. I want a child. And I was a person, I never wanted kids. Like, I had said that since I was a kid, never having children. And it did feel like a very sudden feeling or sudden urge, like, I want a kid. But I knew, and this is where the process continued, making that like connection with the triggers in the body and the mind. I knew that I wouldn't be able to get pregnant and carry a pregnancy to full term if I was not completely like, I'm healed. Like, I can't continue to feel emotionally triggered by this experience. But the plant work was just every day. Like, it was just always, I'd have to go back to journals, but it was just always connecting with the plants.
Can you remember, besides burdock and hawthorn, were there any, I mean, I'm imagining that your herbal apprenticeship, that you did a number of one plant sadhanas, or periods of time where you were focusing on one plant, and that created a collection of close allies, intimate friends in the plant realm for you. And then you might have started to branch out after that. Have there been other notable plant friends that are just part of your life now that you can mention, and what some of the support that they've offered you, and specifically for what wisdoms maybe you can distill some of that for you, what they mean for you, what they offer you?
Sure. I've worked with goldenrod for a good number of time, and that was really supportive to the kidneys being that center of fear and anxiety. And another one of those emotions that I wasn't as connected to. So I feel like each plant helps me connect with my own like expression of emotion and helps me understand emotion in a deeper way. And I worked with goldenrod for a good while to help support the kidneys, but to help support me through anxiety, through fear of being attacked. another one of those layers around around emotions and trauma. And as I started to tell my story, fear of being attacked, by the family, that was really coming up and resurfacing. And so goldenrod was that plant that helped me during that time. I've worked with lobelia a lot last year. Good, was so good for the nervous system. And this was a different kind of like anxiety and fear, but just that I think helping me recognize my own constitution and how I am prone to anxiety in ways that I had not connected with before. What else? Hawthorn, definitely for the heart. Hawthorn, and I worked with hawthorn and burdock together. I had to add hawthorn to my burdock because it was almost too intense. I was like, I need to soften the energy. That's another thing. I was having like just crazy nightmares. Like the nightmares where you're seeing that like there's still so much to uncover in this process that you're working through, and that there's so much that's still unresolved. But during that dream space, I could see the dreams become like gradually less and less intense, and I could see myself standing more and more in my power. And so that was a beautiful process with burdock and hawthorn too that I forgot to mention. Wow. What else? Marshmallow. I've worked with marshmallow. I've worked with dandelion. I've worked with so many. Like right now I'm working with John the Conqueror root, not ingesting it, but just working with this little nugget of a root. And I've been working with it for about 3 months or more, and just holding it and carrying it and meditating with it and seeing what comes up. So much I feel like is revealed later. Like it starts to make sense later, kind of like that connect the dots.
Any clues so far with the John the Conqueror root?
John the Conqueror root. I think that, there's like a nuance with like standing in your power. Like, I don't have any nuggets yet. It hasn't come together yet.
Well, it's a mystery to be revealed as you continue. So it sounds to me like, I would be curious to what you would advise somebody new to, or even seasoned in herbalism, because I guess I did when I first started learning herbs, one herb at a time, but not as intensively as it sounds like your training recommended, right? It sounds like you really choose one herb and sit with it and do all the different things with it and just be with what it has to tell you. And so I'm curious if there's a way to initiate that, that type of having a relationship with a particular herb that you would recommend for people who want to explore this way of communing with the herb.
Yeah, and this is what I teach my students as well. I think that there's always a plant that's calling you, whether you're driving. Like we moved to Atlanta a couple of years ago, and I was always curious about these flowers that I would see along the road. And I think it's paying attention to what are the plants in your environment, what are the spices in your cabinet that you really feel called to. And if you go to the natural food store, go to the herb aisle and see what sticks out to you. And without doing a whole lot of Googling and am I doing this right and questioning it, just connect with it. Just make a commitment to work with it every day and to almost date it like as if you were dating a human being. Like you're spending time, you're getting to know. I'm not saying don't do any research, but we're so mental that we start there and then we allow the mind to decide for us. And it's like, this is really establishing a heart-to-heart connection. And it's so much bigger than just, working with working with the plant. It's about working with yourself through the plant and allowing it to speak to you and allow it to inspire you. You can hold it in your hand and meditate and then just write down what are your insights. Do some guide writing. What comes up and don't judge it. Just write it and put the paper away. Come back to it at a later time. Put it under your pillow. Make a topical medicine, especially if people are, a little hesitant to ingest without doing all the Googling. Make a topical medicine, infuse it in oil and rub that on your body. Rub it on your chakra centers, your heart chakra. your third eye and see what happens, and just allow the plants to open you up, but really follow your inspirations. Like it's communicating with you. So many people are unsure of like, well, I don't really know what's happening. And it's like, it's happening. What's happening is happening. And trust it. And it is. Sometimes it is yet to be revealed, but you are changing through this process, and always for the better.
Mm. So I'm curious how you met John the Conqueror root. That's one, it's completely unfamiliar to me. I don't even know. I wouldn't know what it even looked like growing. How did you meet it?
It is a plant that's used in traditional African American folk medicine. I have not done a lot of research on it myself, and I'm trying to think. Maybe one of my friends who's also on the plant path with me mentioned it in she does intuitive readings, and I get a reading from her maybe about twice a year. And she mentioned working with it. And I didn't at the time, but then it came up again, like in another conversation. And so I said, okay, let me just go buy some John the Conqueror root. And I purchased some off of Etsy, and I decided intentionally, like, I'm not doing a whole lot of research. I'm just going to work with it myself and see what unfolds.
Wow. Isn't that somehow how it is, right?
Right.
Oftentimes that's how we get introduced. Somebody says something several times.
Right.
Different person is going to say, or just like you being the second person to talk about anger.
Right.
And, or actually the third person, because a course that I'm in, one of the required books or one of the recommended books is Healing Rage by Ruth King. I don't know if that's a book that you've ever read or, and I just started reading it, and it's really good. It talks about all that early childhood and stuff and all the different ways that our emotional development gets disrupted, and how that, and I'm just reading the intro, so I haven't got into the healing part yet. And then one of my apprentices says, what do I do with my anger? And now, and the anger, so it's beautiful. Well, I just want to thank you so much. So have you had children yet?
Yes, right.
You
yes.
You had a baby or more?
Yes. So that was that was like that other layer of healing, which was understanding, like, okay, you feel the desire to have this child. The child was coming through. My wife and I, our dreams, like so many messages were coming through this, like the soul wants to come through. But I knew within myself that if I did not continue to work on just healing from trauma, that there was no way we were going to be able to get pregnant and have him. So that was probably just a 9-month process in and of itself. And we got pregnant on the second attempt in 2014. And we have our son Niles in 2015. He's now almost 5 years old. And he really is, I'm so glad you brought this conversation back around. He really is like just the miracles that happen when you decide to heal. That is so unexpected. And it's like the life that awaits you is just, it's explosive with joy. And he is totally that. I could never have imagined this for myself. It's so amazing. And that's really what I try to like communicate to, the people who are considering coming into the herbal mentorship program that I teach. It's like, you have no idea what's in store for you when you heal. Like, just do it. It's tough. No lies. It's tough. But we're so resilient. And you have these wonderful plant allies and supporters that can do so much of the emotional heavy lifting for you.
Beautiful. Yeah. And so it sounds to me, though, I just want to clarify one point, because when you were talking, I could hear that some listeners could interpret what you said in a certain way, but then I'm hearing that might not be what you meant. And so what you were saying about, you knew that that you needed to stay focused on your healing process if you were going to be able to have a child. And did you ever feel like you had to get to a certain point of your healing process? And how did you know when you'd gotten to that point?
Perfect. Yes. I knew, yeah, for me that this was the thing I needed to continue working on healing if I was to have this child. And for me, so anytime I would talk about trauma, think about my childhood, I would have this emptying out feeling in my body, like just feeling like if you dumped out a bucket, it's like, I can't support myself. I could barely stand. And so I knew that in order for me to get pregnant, carry, have this baby, I needed to be able to talk about my story and not get all emotionally or physically just like so weakened and debilitated by it. And so that was really the test. That was really how I knew, because I started telling my story. I just started sharing, and there were, so much like these synchronicities in the conversations around anger. There were just so many opportunities for me to weave in healing trauma into conversations. And that gave me so much practice, and I could tell within myself. And I ended up having a conversation. That was something that I had to do too. I had a conversation with my father, who was the person who abused me. And I called him on the phone, and it was really just for me to see how I feel. What do I feel like in having this conversation? That was really about nothing. It wasn't a conversation about anything. And because I was able to keep myself together, I knew I was ready.
Wow. So let me I want to clarify some of this too, because there could be so much nuance in this. So you're talking about noticing the visceral emotional reactions in your body. That alone can be a huge thing, especially if you're coming from where you were completely not in touch with any of that to begin with, where you were kind of numb. It doesn't mean it wasn't happening.
Right.
Numb. And oftentimes, I know I speak from a personal experience that being numb to your emotions doesn't mean it's not affecting your relationships, or it's not doing, all kinds of secret things off to the side that you're not aware of, right? It just means you're numb to it and blissfully going about your life like it's not happening, right?
Exactly.
And you don't have no idea how it's affecting your health and your relationships and your livelihood and all these things, right? And so as you start to become aware of it, you get some training, you start working with plants, whatever path you're on. For me, it was yoga and breathing and somatic awareness mixed with the herbs as well, and the dietary change and all of that. You start to become aware. And then you start to notice, oh my goodness, every time I see this color or someone says these words, I have this huge backpack of emotional response to the current circumstance that just doesn't fit.
Right.
And every time and for you noticed even further that if you were to tell someone about your childhood history that you knew about, if you were to talk about it, it would create this really strong, visceral, physiological reaction that was incapacitating.
Right.
Did you have that kind of a response even when you weren't telling your story sometimes? Like, were there situations and circumstances that would bring up that response in you that didn't really merit that kind of full body, nervous system, somatic response?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime I would even think about it, so I'm not even like having a discussion about it, but when I would think about it, smelling alcohol in somebody else's breath, that started to become triggering. What were other experiences? Seeing someone else's explosive anger, that started to become very triggering. Yeah, I probably during that time too stopped watching violence on TV. For sure. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like now I'm not numb. Now I feel, and it's like, no, I can't really do that anymore. So yeah, there were lots of instances, and it was really like being so intentional and so deliberate about bringing myself back to the center. I mean, back into the present, and being like, I'm not being snapped back. That's what a trigger kind of does. Snap you back into this memory, this experience that you're no longer in, you're no longer living. And I had to be very intentional about bringing myself back into this moment and being able to know for myself, I'm safe right here, right now. I'm safe. There's nothing nothing serious is going on right now.
And so was it just that, what you just described, that continual bringing yourself back to the present when you would notice that response, that triggered response or re-stimulated response? Was it just that combined with the herbs, or did you also have any other kind of therapeutic support in your life to work through that? Because I know for a lot of people, that kind of reaction to just everyday circumstances can be very tenacious.
Right.
And it can be very challenging to do what you just described of bringing yourself back, because it just loops and then it's re-traumatizing you and re-strengthening that. It's like, it's almost an addiction in our nervous system to the stress hormones. And so the herbs can help to replace those stress hormones and transmute those stress hormones with, and so that you're not just addicted to them anymore. But it can take other things too, at least in my experience. And so I'm curious what other kinds of therapies, if any, that you have supported this process with.
Right. So I was doing yoga as well. I had already changed my diet, and it was the plants, and it was practicing presence and meditation. I was journaling a lot. My wife and I, we did go to therapy for maybe about 6 sessions, which was kind of just another test. I think it was an opportunity for me to say, okay, can I go and can I talk about this? I didn't find that there was anything in addition that the therapist was giving us that I implemented. It was just an opportunity for me to talk and to vocalize a lot of just voice work. That was another just layer of healing trauma, was being able to speak up for myself, being able to share what I'm feeling safe sharing. I would often, it didn't matter what I had to talk about, I would just feel that lump in the throat. I would get so nervous and so anxious just to speak. And I was very intentional just about just talking more. And that was very, very helpful. And safely sharing what I'm feeling, even if it doesn't in my mind sound like it makes sense. It's like, just share what you're feeling, and realizing that the world doesn't blow up when you share what you're feeling. Or practicing presence, because I knew that I'm like, I am not, I'm not 4 years old anymore. I'm not 8 years old anymore. I'm not 13 years old anymore. I am 20 at the time, maybe 30 years old, 32 years old. I don't know. I don't remember. 32 years old. I am not that young little girl anymore. I have power. I can stand in it. And I would just talk myself down. Come right back to the present, talk to myself down. Like, I am here, I am powerful. Lots of affirmations about just who I am and who I want to be and who I know I'm becoming. Yeah. Wow. But it's I knew that this is one thing that I knew that because trauma was so persistent in showing up, like, you can't take a break from like healing your trauma and like think like, oh, I'm good. That's like when you get those surface layers, right? And you're like, I'm good, I don't need to work on it anymore. But it was so persistent in showing up in all these different areas of life, relationships, work, health, that I knew that I would have to show up for myself in love even more than trauma showing up. If we're battling, if these two are battling, I'm going to win.
Wow.
I'm going to win. Love is going to win this battle.
So really nurturing that by deliberately choosing to love yourself. It sounds like, I call it remothering, right? If you
yes,
you had someone there when that little girl inside of you was reacting appropriately,
right,
in fear and anger and all of those feelings that come up for you, and incapacitatively so, right? That little girl just like, you remothered yourself by creating safety in your life to even feel those feelings to begin with. And then she has had the space, you've been giving her the space to express and process that. And part of processing those feelings are, you're safe now. I got you now. Yep. We're here now. Nobody's hurting you anymore.
And I did that. I absolutely did that with that, that version of myself. Because I believed when I was young, I was like, when I turn 18, I'm going to be good. Like, I know, just make it to 18, you're going to be all right. And And I feel like that was the older version of me, this 30-something-year-old version of me talking to that version of me. And I remember, and like now, yes, I'm this 32-year-old woman. I'm okay. And now I'm talking to her. Like, that's that, that time that it's like, no, that was me talking to me.
Right.
We get to still talking to me.
Right. We get to become our own guardian angels, right? Yeah. We get to travel through time and actually, and so many, this inner child work, it really is that we are working. Like, I've shown up for myself in stressful moments as a child or as a baby or any phase. We're actually going there and being that guardian angel for that phase of our existence. So it's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing about that. Wonderful. So I would love for you to share about, you say you have some programs that you have a mentorship program. Is that an online program?
Yes, it is. So I teach a 6-month online mentorship program called Herbal Medicine for the Soul. And it's herbal medicine, emotional alchemy, and spiritual alignment, medical astrology, all in one. And this is really helping people, turn your health issues into non-issues holistically, spiritually. It is online, but we also have a live component where we meet every week and we talk, we do Q&A, we do case studies. We look at charts, like we're diving deeply into our emotional spaces as well as our physical bodies, to align with well-being, because that's what we're here to experience joy. And that's what I want. I want the world to be joyful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to learn more about your program and your other offerings, where would they go?
You can head on over to my website, iwillaRemedy.com. That's IWILLA, that's my middle name, remedy.com. And you can see lots of information on the site. You can watch a free video. There's lots of free resources as well as some herbal medicine products. And follow us on Instagram. Iwilla Remedy on Instagram.
Iwilla Remedy on Instagram as well. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Selima, excuse me. I got a little mixed up with Iwilla, Selima.
Yeah.
A mouthful. Selima, Iwilla. Yeah, lovely. So listeners, also, if you're interested in learning more about the Womb-Centered Healing Temple, you can go to wombcenteredhealing.com and learn all kinds of things there as well. So thank you once again for joining us, Selima. Any last words of wisdom for us before we depart?
No, thank you so much. Let me think. Words of wisdom. Chase your joy. Chase is the wrong word because it's not running away from you. Like, your joy is so here. It's so present, and just choose your joy. That's probably a better way of saying it. Choose your joy, because it's there, and miracles await when you really decide to embark on that healing path. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Your life is it's wildly amazing. Go after it.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm receiving that today. Choosing joy. All right. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Take care, and we'll see you next time.